The Triarch Assembly Chamber glittered like a cathedral carved from starlight. Walls of translucent crystal pulsed with faint luminescence, refracting colors across the vaulted dome. Thousands of species crowded the amphitheater, each sealed within environmental fields, dense atmospheres, caustic vapors, liquid basins. A chorus of voices overlapped in tones human ears were never meant to process. Some hissed through mandibles, others resonated like musical instruments, while a few thundered as if entire storms spoke through them. In the center, the dais rose above the chaos. Archon Carix of the Veyron Dominion stood tall, his elongated frame cloaked in shimmering scales that reflected every light. He was ancient, dignified, and radiated authority so absolute it silenced lesser species by presence alone. His voice rolled across the chamber, amplified by the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. "The Terrans," he announced, savoring the name as if it were a curse, "are reckless, disruptive, and dangerous to the stability of this assembly. For decades they've expanded without heed to treaty or boundary. They consume resources at an alarming pace, provoke border incidents, and dare to claim parity with their betters. Today, we put an end to their arrogance." Murmurs surged around the chamber. Some alien delegations cheered, others offered guttural sounds of agreement. Admiral Elena Vare sat still at humanity's modest table near the lower tier. Flanked by two aides, she kept her hands folded, her posture steady, her expression unreadable. The humans were dwarfed by their surroundings, a delegation of only 3 among thousands. Above them loomed behemoths whose single limbs outweighed her entire body. Yet Vare felt no awe. She had seen this chamber too many times, each visit an exercise in endurance. Carix lifted one clawed hand, silencing the chamber. His eyes, cold orbs like polished stone, locked on the human table. "The Dominion proposes Resolution 17, the disarmament of all Terran fleets, the dismantling of their military industries, and the placing of Earth and its colonies under protective guardianship. Humanity has proven itself incapable of restraint. The galaxy can no longer afford their recklessness." Applause, if the cacophony of alien noises could be called that, swept through the hall. One of Elena's aides, a younger diplomat named Caro, leaned toward her. "Admiral, they can't." "They can't," Elena cut in softly, her voice calm, her eyes never leaving the dais. Caro's jaw tightened. "If this passes, then humanity ceases to exist as a sovereign power," she finished for him. The words were steady, factual, not an ounce of panic. But deep inside, a weight pressed hard against her restraint. An insected delegate rose, clicking its mandibles. Its voice rasped through translation units. "Terrans resist tariffs. They exploit disputed zones. Always claiming misunderstanding. Always claiming innocence." Another delegate, a massive quadruped whose species empire stretched across 20 systems, bellowed agreement. "Their fleets fire without warning. Their colonies trespass. They must be contained before they spread further." The accusations piled one atop another, each sharper, each more dismissive. Humanity had endured this chorus for decades. Each time they came to the assembly, they were treated not as equals, but as dangerous children. Caro finally broke. "This is slander. We've honored treaties. We've compromised at every—" "Silence," Carix commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. "The humans will speak only when recognized." He turned toward the chamber, scales shimmering. "They mistake endurance for entitlement. Survival does not equal respect. It earns only suspicion." Elena's jaw flexed once. She remembered every embargo, every blockade. She remembered the families who starved on Europa when grain shipments were taxed into ruin. She remembered Terran freighters boarded under flimsy pretexts, their cargoes stripped, their crews humiliated. Humanity had swallowed it all, because the alternative was annihilation. Now Carix spread his arms in a grand gesture. "Let the vote proceed. For the stability of the Concord, we strip the Terrans of their weapons and bind their hands for the good of all." Symbols flared across crystalline panels as delegations cast their votes. One after another, green lights ignited across the chamber. Caro whispered furiously, Admiral, we can't just watch, Elena murmured. Her eyes followed the spreading tide of approval. 1,000 voices condemning her species to servitude. The patience humanity had cultivated for survival pressed tight in her chest, coiled like a spring at its final limit. Finally, the tally displayed across the dome. Overwhelming majority in favor. Humanity, outvoted, overruled, bound by the Assembly's decree. Carrick straightened, scales shimmering brighter. His voice dripped with triumph. It is done. Humanity will be disarmed. Their sovereignty placed under guardianship. Let this be the lesson, patience has ended. The chamber erupted in sound, cheers, hisses, guttural roars of satisfaction. The verdict echoed like a funeral toll. Elena rose. Her chair scraped softly, barely audible in the storm of voices. Yet the moment she stood, the chamber began to hush. Perhaps it was the stillness in her movement, or the way her eyes, cold steel gray, cut through the noise. Her hands rested easily at her sides, her bearing steady, her voice low but sharp enough to slice through the silence. You mistake patience for weakness, she said. The translation units carried her words across the chamber. Thousands of alien voices stilled at once. Her gaze fixed on Carrick's. You believe we have endured because we lacked the will to resist. You are wrong. We endured because peace was worth more than pride. We endured because survival demanded silence. But silence is not submission. Endurance is not weakness. She paused. Not a soul moved. I suggest you pray you never learn the difference. For a heartbeat, the chamber remained frozen. Then whispers rippled like a spreading fire. Delegates shifted uneasily. Even the most arrogant species exchanged wary glances. Carrick's voice broke the stillness, but it lacked its earlier certainty. Empty words from a cornered species. Elena's eyes never wavered. Words, yes. For now. With that, she sat, folding her hands once more. Her calm returned, but something permanent had shifted. The chamber could feel it. The coiled spring had finally trembled. The vote stood. The resolution had passed. But the assembly no longer celebrated. Fear had entered the chamber. And for the first time, they wondered if perhaps the humans had been silent not because they were weak, but because they were waiting. The chamber reopened the following cycle with no less ceremony than before. Crystalline walls glimmered in pale blue light, casting reflections across tiers of delegates. The vote had already been declared, the resolution etched into record. To most, this meeting was a mere formality, an announcement of humanity's acceptance of their chains. Archon Carrick presided at the dais once more, his scales glinting gold. He looked down at the human delegation with thinly veiled contempt. Terrans, he intoned, you will comply with Resolution 17. Your fleets will be surrendered to the Assembly's appointed custodians. Your industries will dismantle war production facilities. The Assembly will oversee your colonies. Resistance will be met with force. The words echoed through the hall. No delegate challenged them. Many nodded in satisfaction, eager to see the upstarts humbled. Admiral Elena Veyer remained seated, posture calm, gaze fixed straight ahead. Her two aides shifted uneasily. Caro, still young enough to cling to hope, leaned toward her. Admiral, if we don't speak now, we will, Elena answered, her voice steady. She rose slowly, drawing all eyes. The chamber hushed. Even those uninterested in human affairs felt a faint curiosity. The Admiral had spoken only a handful of words during the last session, yet they still lingered in memory. Elena's voice carried without strain. For decades, humanity endured humiliation, sanctions, raids. We accepted insults that would have sparked wars in ages past. Not because we were powerless. Not because we were afraid. But because peace mattered more than pride. We thought patience would earn respect. Instead, it earned contempt. A ripple moved through the delegates. Some shifted uncomfortably, others smirked at what they thought was another desperate plea. Carrick's lips pulled back, exposing serrated teeth. You would lecture the Assembly, Terran? Your species gambled with survival and now seeks sympathy. Elena shook her head. Not sympathy. Understanding. She gestured toward the ceiling where crystalline projectors hung. You see only what you wanted to see, a species struggling to keep pace, always on the defensive. But you never looked closely. Her aide tapped a control pad. Holofeeds burst across the chamber. Images of Terran fleets filled the dome, ships arranged in formations, sleek carriers flanked by destroyers, hulls dark as obsidian. The assembly's translation algorithms marked locations, deep space sectors the assembly believed empty. Now they blazed with Terran emblems. Gasps, screeches, and guttural noises erupted from every tier. Delegations leaned forward, scanning the displays. Numbers scrolled along the bottom: ship counts, fleet strength. It was more than anyone had suspected, far more than the Dominion's intelligence had reported. Carrick's rose sharply, his scales rippling in agitation. Lies. Fabrications meant to intimidate. Your fleets cannot rival ours. Elena's reply was calm. Intimidation is not our aim. We don't bluff. We don't threaten. We endured every sanction, every embargo, every blockade, while building quietly. Every insult you dealt us, we remembered. Every loss, we prepared to avenge if forced. The chamber roared with overlapping voices, fear, outrage, disbelief. Elena waited, hands clasped behind her back, until the noise subsided enough for her words to cut through again. Understand this, she said. Humanity did not come here to beg for mercy. We came because we believed in cooperation. But if you cage us, if you strip us of sovereignty, you will find your chains too fragile to hold. A delegate from the Terex Combine, long oppressed by the Dominion, rose with a tremor in his voice. Are you declaring war? Elena turned toward him, her gaze steady. No. We are declaring truth. We want peace, true peace, not subjugation. But if you deny us that, war will not be ours alone. It will belong to all who mistook patience for surrender. Carrick slammed his clawed hand against the dais. You dare threaten this assembly? You insolent! Elena cut across him, her tone sharp but level. Threats are cheap. Humanity does not deal in them. We state only what will happen if you force us. That is warning, not bluster. Her words hung heavy. Delegates who once laughed at Terran obstinacy now sat in uneasy silence. The images of Terran fleets still glowed above them, undeniable proof of hidden strength. Carrick tried to rally the hall. Do not be deceived. Terrans are children with toys. Their fleets cannot match the great powers. Children who survived plagues, wars, and an Earth that tried to kill us every day. Elena interrupted. Her voice grew harder, sharper with each word. Children who crossed the void with vessels held together by stubbornness and steel. Children who outlasted every trial you threw at us. You mistake youth for weakness. That mistake will cost you dearly if you persist. The chamber grew restless. Whispers surged, some fearful, some calculating. The sight of Terran ships in disciplined formation unsettled them deeply. Humanity had been underestimated too long, and now that underestimation cracked like glass under strain. Carol glanced at Elena, awe in his eyes. She ignored him, her focus locked on the assembly. Let this moment be clear, Elena declared. We will not bow. Not to the Dominion. Not to this assembly. If you force our hand, you will remember this day not as the end of our patience, but as the beginning of your downfall. For several breaths silence held. The delegates stared at the humans as though seeing them for the first time. Then, slowly, the chamber dissolved into chaos. Some demanded immediate sanctions, others urged caution. A few, long resentful of the Dominion's dominance, whispered that perhaps the Terrans were the allies they had waited for. Carrick bared his teeth, fury radiating from every scale. This is blasphemy against order. You bring only ruin. Elena inclined her head slightly. Or balance. The chamber erupted again, louder than before. Arguments clashed across the tiers, accusations and counter-accusations flung like weapons. Delegates who once mocked humanity now hesitated, calculating new possibilities. Elena remained standing, hands clasped, expression calm. Inside, the coil of restraint had finally broken, yet she felt no chaos, no panic. Only clarity. Patience had snapped. And the galaxy had heard it break. The assembly chamber had never sounded like this. It was no longer a chorus of unified voices but a storm of clashing arguments. Some shouted for war, others urged restraint, still more demanded verification of the images that hovered above them, Terran fleets arrayed like a silent promise. Archon Carrick stood at the dais, his authority fraying. His voice boomed above the uproar. Do not be swayed by illusion. Terran deception runs deep. These fleets are smoke and mirrors stitched together from fragments. They cannot challenge the Dominion. They cannot challenge us. But the certainty in his tone had weakened, and every delegate heard it. Admiral Elena Veyer remained on her feet, hands clasped behind her back. She had spoken her truth, and the chamber had fractured under it. Yet the moment demanded more. She stepped forward, and her movement alone pulled the noise down to a low murmur. We came here for peace, she said, her words sharp, deliberate. But peace requires respect. You have mistaken endurance for submission, silence for consent. That ends today. Humanity will remain sovereign. That is not up for negotiation. The delegates shifted. Some whispered among themselves, calculating the risks of defying her. Others stared at the hollow feet still flickering above them, weighing the possibility that humanity was stronger than anyone had realized. Carrick leaned forward, his claws scraping the crystalline dais. You presume equality where none exists. The Dominion has ruled this assembly since its founding. We have endured thousands of cycles. You are children with borrowed fire. Elena met his gaze without flinching. Children who learned quickly. Children who built fire into steel and carried it to the stars. You mistake our youth for fragility. You mistake restraint for fear. Mistakes, Archon, are costly. Murmurs grew louder. A delegation from the Elith Confederacy, long resentful of Dominion tariffs, called out. If the Terrans hold fleets like these, then perhaps they should have a voice equal to yours. Gasps spread through the chamber. The idea was unthinkable only days before. Carrick's scales rippled with fury. You would elevate them to our level? You would hand them legitimacy? Another delegate, this one from a minor trading species, hissed through its translator. Perhaps legitimacy has already been taken. They have endured everything thrown at them. That resilience is not weakness. It is power. The tide had shifted. Doubt seeped into the chamber, eroding Carrick's control. He tried once more. Do not be deceived. If we permit Terran sovereignty, they will destabilize all. They will spread unchecked until nothing remains but their shadow. Elena raised her voice, cutting through the chamber. If you fear our growth, it is because you know what we endured to achieve it. We are not conquerors. But we will not be conquered. If you force our hand, the fires you kindle will not be contained. Her aide Caro watched, wide-eyed, as silence rippled outward again. The entire chamber hung on her words. She continued, her tone cold and steady. You asked for guardianship? Instead, you receive warning. Never mistake silence for surrender again. If you attempt to cage us, you will find your own chains broken. The chamber erupted once more, but now the noise carried a different energy. Some argued for immediate war, but their voices were met with equal force by those who counseled caution. The sight of the Terran fleets remained suspended in the air, undeniable and unyielding. Carrick struck the dais, desperate to reclaim authority. This is blasphemy against order. Terrans bring only ruin. Elena inclined her head slightly. Order built on submission is not order. It is tyranny. The word carried like a blade through the chamber. Old grudges surfaced instantly. Species long bent under Dominion rule stirred with recognition. Humanity's defiance resonated in them like a struck chord. Delegates began calling out not at the humans, but at Carrick's. You fear them because they are what you cannot control. One shouted. Another added. Perhaps it is time the Dominion's voice was not the only one that mattered. The Archon's scales flared with incandescent rage, but his protests drowned in the rising tide of dissent. Elena remained silent, letting the moment unfold. She knew the power of stillness, of allowing others to wrestle with the truth. Humanity's message had been delivered. Nothing Carrick said could erase it now. Finally, a senior moderator of the assembly struck the floor with a resonance hammer, silencing the hall. The resolution will be postponed for review. Further investigation into Terran capabilities is required. Postponed, not passed, not enforced. A single word, but it shifted the axis of power. Elena inclined her head in acknowledgement. She had not needed victory today. She only needed doubt. Doubt had been sown, and it would spread faster than Carrick's could contain. The session adjourned in disarray. Delegates rushed to confer, to reconsider alliances, to send messages to their homeworlds. Humanity left the chamber not as subjects awaiting punishment but as a force no one could ignore. Carroll walked beside her as they exited, his voice hushed. "Admiral, I think they're afraid." Elena did not look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the corridor ahead, where lights spilled across polished floors. "Good," she said. "Fear teaches faster than words." Hours later, aboard her flagship anchored in high orbit, she stood on the command deck before a wall of stars. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the observation glass, fleet icons pulsing in disciplined formation beyond. "They thought patience made us weak," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "Now they will never forget the moment it ended." Behind her, Carol remained silent, sensing that nothing more needed to be said. Humanity had snapped, and the galaxy had felt the crack. The future would not be easy, war remained possible, perhaps inevitable. But for the first time in generations, humanity stood not as an object of scorn, but as a power to be reckoned with. The reckoning had begun.